Margaret was a mother who gave everything she had, her strength, her love, her entire life, for her only son, David. She went hungry so that he could eat, worked under the hot sun so that he could have a better future, and sacrificed her own comfort just to see him smile. Life had never been easy for her. She had fallen in love against her parents' wishes, married a man who later abandoned her, and was left alone to raise their child. Her family refused to help. They reminded her that they had warned her, and so she bore the burden of motherhood, all by herself. Years passed, and Margaret's tears turned into quiet prayers. She worked hard, doing every kind of labor she could find, washing clothes, scrubbing floors, carrying heavy loads, just to make sure David lacked nothing. Her dream was simple. She wanted him to have a life better than hers. When David finally finished his studies and found a good job, it felt like a miracle. He bought a house and took his mother with him. Margaret believed her days of pain were over. Then David met Beatrice, a beautiful woman with a soft voice. The first time Margaret saw her, something in her heart warned her that this woman's smile was not genuine. She tried to warn David, but he was blinded by love. He married Beatrice, and at first the house was full of laughter and joy. But soon, Margaret began to sense a change. The air grew cold, and her son's warmth slowly faded. Beatrice wanted David's mother out of the house. She began planting seeds of doubt in his heart. She broke things and blamed Margaret. She lied that Margaret entered their room without knocking. David dismissed her complaints at first, but over time he began to change. Beatrice's final plan was wicked. She bought harmful herbs and secretly hid them in Margaret's room. Then she pretended to cry and told David that his mother had put something in her food to make her infertile. David could not believe it at first, but when he searched his mother's room and found the herbs, his heart shattered. Beatrice acted sorrowful while pretending to protect him. Margaret tried to defend herself, but David's anger blinded him. He shouted at her, accusing her of jealousy and hate. She begged him to believe her, but he ordered her to leave the house. That night, Margaret cried on the floor, remembering all the years she had worked for her son, how she had starved so he could eat, begged for his school fees, and prayed every night for his success. The next morning, with swollen eyes and a broken heart, she packed her clothes and walked out. Before leaving, she told David, "I forgive you. One day you will know the truth." Margaret wandered the streets with long place to go, and her family had long rejected her, and her son had turned her away. The sun was harsh, and her feet ached as she walked aimlessly, until she remembered Grace, an old friend who had once helped her find work. She went to the city where Grace lived and knocked on her door with trembling hands. When Grace saw her, she was shocked and heartbroken. Margaret told her everything, tears streaming down her face. Grace held her hand and said, "You have suffered enough. You will not sleep on the streets. Come inside." Grace gave Margaret food, a bed, and comfort. She reminded her that God still watched over her. What Margaret didn't know was that many years ago, she had saved Grace when she was in trouble, sharing her last meal when Grace's husband was sick and she had no money. Grace had never forgotten her kindness and now had the chance to repay it. One day, Grace's son returned from abroad. When he met Margaret, he took her hands and said, "Mama, my mother told me how you helped us when no one else did. Because of you, I am who I am today." The following week, he surprised her with an envelope full of money and took her to a small but beautiful house he had bought for her. Margaret cried as she stood in front of it. "Is this truly for me?" she asked. "Yes, Mama," he said. "You will never be homeless again. You gave so much love. Now it's time for you to rest." Margaret thanked God for remembering her, but she couldn't sit idle. Having lived her whole life serving others, she began visiting orphaned and homeless children, feeding them and giving them hope. Each morning she would rise early, prepare food, and spend her day helping those who had no one. In her kindness and forgiveness, she found peace. And far away in the very house she helped build, Beatrice's lies began to unravel. Her greed led to ruin, and David's heart was crushed when he finally discovered the truth. The mother he had cast away was innocent. By then it was too late to bring her back, but her love had already written a lesson on his heart, a lesson about sacrifice, truth, and the unbreakable love of a mother. Margaret was a mother who gave everything she had for her only son, David. She went hungry so he could eat, worked under the scorching sun so he could study, and sacrificed her comfort so he could have a better life. After years of hard work, David became successful, bought a house, and took his mother to live with him. Margaret thought her suffering was finally over. Then David met Beatrice, a woman with a charming smile but a heart full of deceit. Margaret sensed danger from the beginning, but David was blinded by love. Soon after their marriage, Beatrice began to poison David's mind against his mother. She lied, manipulated, and eventually framed Margaret, making it seem like she had tried to harm her. David, overwhelmed by anger and confusion, threw his mother out of his house. Heartbroken, Margaret wandered the streets until she found refuge with her old friend Grace, who took her in with love and kindness. Grace remembered how Margaret had once helped her in her time of need, and now it was her turn to repay that kindness. Margaret rebuilt her life through compassion, helping orphans and homeless children. Her pain became her purpose, and she created a home for those who had no one. While Margaret's heart grew peaceful, Beatrice's greed flourished. She lived lavishly, spending David's money on luxury and vanity. David, though successful, was often haunted by guilt whenever he thought of his mother, but Beatrice silenced him with lies. As years passed, they were never blessed with a child, and their marriage grew colder. One day, a wealthy couple recognized Margaret on the street. Years ago, she had worked for them as a cleaner and had once begged them to help her son find a job. They were shocked to learn how David had repaid her in kindness. The couple, now part of David's company, called for a meeting. When David arrived, expecting a promotion, he was met with disappointment instead. They revealed that his job had been given to him because of his mother's integrity, and since he had betrayed her, they could no longer trust him. David was fired that very day. His world collapsed. He lost his job, his wealth, and soon his wife. Beatrice's true nature surfaced when she confessed she had never loved him. She had only stayed for his money. She left him without remorse, taking half of what little he had left. Alone, broken, and filled with regret, David realized how deeply he had wronged his mother. One morning, as he passed a newspaper stand, a familiar face caught his eye. It was Margaret, his mother, smiling on the front page. The article celebrated her for her work with orphans and the homeless. David's eyes filled with tears as he read about her compassion, her strength, and how she turned her suffering into hope for others. Overwhelmed, he decided to find her. After a long journey, he reached the orphanage and saw her surrounded by joyful children. She was feeding them with the same love she had once given him. David fell to his knees, crying uncontrollably, calling out to her. When their eyes met, Margaret froze. David begged for forgiveness, weeping like a child. "Mother, I was blind. I betrayed you. Please forgive me," he cried. Margaret's heart trembled. She remembered the pain of being abandoned but could not hold back her tears. She knelt, embraced him, and said softly, "I forgive you, my son." They held each other and cried, and for the first time in years, peace returned to both their hearts. David stayed by his mother's side, helping her care for the orphans. He rebuilt his life through kindness and humility. Eventually, he met Amanda, a gentle woman who loved and respected his mother deeply. They married and had children, filling Margaret's final years with love and laughter. There were no riches, no mansions, just peace, unity, and true happiness. Each night, Margaret would look at her family and whisper, "Thank you, Lord. My labor was not in vain." This story reminds us that beauty, money, and pride fade away, But a parent's love lasts forever. Those who forget their parents' sacrifices walk the path of regret. True wealth is not found in riches, but in love, respect, and gratitude.